Gory, what a hell of a way to die. Gory, gory, what a hell of a way to die. Gory, gory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It is me, it is Nate. Nate, how are things? I know that you guys just got done with everything. Everybody's brain collapsing because of general elections, and we're about to go into another absolutely brain collapsing thing. But how have things been in the last week?
Oh, fine. You know, I'm working on being a house husband, I guess. Doing stuff around the house, doing some DIY. Smoked myself doing DIY, having to use a hammer drill because every single wall in our house, besides one where there was an extension, is a solid brick wall.
Hell yeah!
So even installing curtain mounts means getting up with, I'm sure you've dealt with this in your house.
Oh, good Lord, yes.
High ass ceilings and solid brick wall, and it's just you and the hammer drill and just fucking oblivion.
Have you done the thing where you start using the hammer drill and it goes in way too easily, and you're like, fuck, now I have to adjust everything because I went through some mortar?
That has happened. Also, I've had the curse of shelves falling on me. And I was installing the shelf, and I got, very, very good solid wall anchors, like 10-centimeter bolts. So they're really long. And three out of the four holes, perfect, solid, super. Like you could practically do pull-ups off it if you had, the right grip. But then the fourth one was a little bit wobbly, and I was like, oh, fucking hell, no, please, no.
And then
because
you got to redo them
mortar.
all.
No, what I did was I actually wrapped the anchor in masking tape and got it, and it was just enough to hold it in. And so I tested it out. I've left stuff on it, left it clear for a while. It's totally fine. And honestly, I'm not worried about it because there's 3 out of 4 bolts, and even if the one did give a little and I'd have to redo it, with that much bolt behind it, it's not going to come all the way out of the wall. But it's still scary no matter what.
You're always just going to be like sitting. It's like the idea of a mortar attack in Afghanistan. It's like it could fucking happen anytime.
It's the fucking shelf of Damocles. I swear to God. But yeah, I mean, as far so correct me if I'm wrong. DIY dads in our listener base. But as I understand it, like with that deep of a bolt, as long as it's solid, I'm not too worried about it. You know what I mean? Like, as long as like it's 3 out of the 4 are solid.
Yeah, I always use brick screws, like these big long. They're nice and long, and they have like the screw itself is kind of strange, and it's basically set for like putting into a pre-drilled hole inside of brick. And I mean, we used to have an old flat screen TV that must have weighed like, God, it felt like it probably weighed about 50 or 60 pounds. And I mounted that shit on my wall and was up there for a couple of years. And one of them was one of the bolts was through mortar, but it was like the center one, so the outside ones were fine. So you should be okay. Now, I am always going to asterisk that though, because I'm not going to say that your shelf curse isn't going to happen at any given time.
Oh no, for sure. Well, it's funny because to figure out what I did wrong the last time, I watched a bunch of YouTube DIY videos, and there's a guy here in Britain who does it, and he was like, "Yeah, here's what I used for a heavy shelf that I want to install into brick," and he recommended the bigger raw plugs, which is a brand of anchor, and in his case, his sister was asking him to install a shelf in her home. It was a solid marble shelf, and she wanted it mounted above her bed, and I was like, "You must have utter faith in your abilities as a handyman to install a shelf that looks like it weighs 40 pounds of fucking marble above your head in bed when you're defenseless." I would not go that far.
No.
But I did use 1/4-inch masonry anchors and screws to install a TV mount in Brooklyn in my old place. And no, my TV wasn't as heavy as the one you're describing, but it was, like a 40-inch TV. And those, I think it was either 4 or 6 points of attachment for those. And it held up super well. Like once I got the mounting correct so it was level, like the same sort of thing, you could do pull-ups off it. It's just making sure that it's seated correctly.
Yeah, that's always that. I don't like doing wall stuff. I don't like putting in wall shelves because, though I'll tell you, we had a moose, not a moose. It was a reindeer, a caribou head. Like my wife had like a family friend had shot a caribou in 1983 in Alaska, and they had the head stuffed and mounted and everything, and they just didn't have a place for it. It was like in the guy's garage, and us with these giant vaulted ceilings and everything, they're like, we should, would you be willing to take it? Because like it's not like a deer head. We're always looking for like some taxidermy thing to hang up, and I don't fucking hunt. I'm too lazy for that nonsense. But this guy was just like, do you want this caribou head? That like, if you were to sell it, you would probably get like $1,000 for it. I mean, just the size of this thing. And I managed to get that up in drywall, like a couple of it didn't weigh too much. Like it wasn't like, it was probably maybe about 40 or 50 pounds, but it was like an awkward like size, and most of the weight was in the front, so it was always like, once I hung it, it was always pulling forward on it, so but I found some, like, I don't know, I can't remember how I got this thing sunk in, but I managed to get that up, and that thing never fell, and we eventually gifted it to a friend. Now that we're moving, the new house does not have the ceilings that would be able to deal with it, but it's, people say that like there's some lost generational shit because millennials don't know how to do handyman stuff, but like I didn't fucking know how to do any of this stuff either until I had to do it, and then I watched, like you did, I watched YouTube videos, and there's always a guy that's making shit. But the garage door opener that I have is from probably like maybe the 90s. Like it's so old. It's old and it works though. And I was trying to look something up, and there's like fucking videos of like my specific model of people like breaking it down, opening it up, talking about it, and like how many of these things fucking exist?
Well, I mean, most of them have probably gotten imported to be used for EFPs, but the ones that remain in America, people do need to know how to take them apart. You
could turn a garage door opener, like not the button click thing. I mean, like the thing, the machine that literally opens the garage and then closes it. I mean, you could turn anything into an IED, I guess.
So I think the thing with the IEDs was they used to use, as I understand it, one of like the more popular things they used for explosively formed penetrators, because we're going to talk about Iran, and we have to talk about how everyone in the U.S. Army is convinced that Iran killed their friends in Iraq, when that's probably not the case, because don't deny Iraqis agency. Please, come on. We don't.
The Iraqis hate us for many, many reasons, all on their own. They do not need the Iranians to kill us.
And they don't need to be gaslit viciously by our inability to recognize their agency. So basically the idea was that EFPs obviously have to be very precisely aimed to have maximum effect. And so they would, as I understand it, I was never in Iraq, but people that I knew that were in Iraq, so they encountered this, where they would basically use a garage door opener's IR beam. Basically the thing that you use to the beam that is in place to determine whether or not something's blocking the door, which would automatically stop the door. And they would basically take those parts and they would rewire them so you could install those IR beam, connectors onto a battery connection and mount them into something like a piece of foam that you paint, or something to look like rubbish or look like a piece of rock or something like that. Cover it in trash bags and shit, and just leave it on the side of the road. And basically, when a vehicle would pass through that IR beam, it would say, it would deliver the electrical signal that would normally open, cause the garage door to stop closing and go back. But in this case, it would send the signal to then detonate the blasting cap that would fire the EFP. And so, if it was aimed correctly, obviously, then it would puncture through a vehicle and blast people into pieces, because they're really nasty weapons. And so, they're legitimately, that was, as I understood it, that was something that people were said to look out for. We would go through these like SSE training courses where they'd show us examples of these things, and they were legitimately, they might not have been straight from America, but they were the same kind of thing. They were automatic garage door openers with IR sensors. Yeah, I mean, it's just an IR beam. That's really easy. And it's kind of funny because it went, the evolution of the IED, not to get too deep into it, but it started with like switch plates and pressure plates, things that were very simple. That was pretty much all I experienced in Afghanistan, to be honest with you. And but then it kind of like, because I was in Iraq, and when you were in when I was in Afghanistan, their IEDs were not a thing. Like nobody worried about them. It wasn't until Iraq that they really started. Like it felt like Iraq was the main place for IEDs, because in Afghanistan it's basically just, I don't know, we got some 155 shells, just wire them together
and put it on a switch plate so that once the circuit is completed, like very, very basic, circuit gets completed, electrical signal is sent, detonates, causes the detonation. Iraq was where like the really the real bomb geniuses, maybe, like, because the vehicles that we had like all of these blocking sensors and shit. Like it would block cell phone signals. It would block like you would have to have something specific for cell phone signals and something specific for garage door signals, or like the lower frequency ones. But like what you're discussing is basically going back to a load. It's just like once a circuit is broken, then the thing goes off. So it's I don't want, like, I'm going to say this and not in some kind of like fun celebration way, but I'd be really interested to read a history of the IEDs and how they evolved and devolved and re-evolved again over the course of the last 15 years or so. And I don't know if anybody's doing that or has done that, but I think that'd be really just like a really cool kind of, because it was always changing. Like every time, like IED training, shit's different again. They're blowing us up in new and interesting ways. And that's where I learned about the EFP, which, so the EFP is a explosively formed penetrator, where it's basically you have a concave plate of copper, and an explosive behind it.
Yeah, and it's basically put inside a heavy pipe, something that's not going to be completely obliterated by the explosion when you detonate it. And so what it does is it liquefies that copper plate into a dart, or more or less a dart-shaped blob, and hot, liquid molten copper at high speed will blast through, with enough force, blast through metal, glass, whatever.
It cut through armor, like our armored MRAPs. I don't know if it could cut through fully through a tank, but like those little explosions would just absolutely devastate. And you had to hit it right. I mean, it wasn't like you could just have a random explosion and hope for a pressure wave to hit or something like that. You definitely had to aim those things right. But when they were aimed right, it went hot knife through butter. Very scary.
I only heard stories because I wasn't there, but obviously my battalion deployed to Iraq during the surge in they deployed, I want to say, late 05, and they got extended, so they didn't come back until like December 06, January 07. So the worst fucking time in the war, absolutely worst time in the war, as I understand it. And yeah, they had like a platoon leader in one of our companies get decapitated by an EFP, and just about everybody who had been in the areas where these things were deployed had stories about whole engine block of a Humvee getting penetrated, that these things could take out MRAPs, or at least they could severely disable them. They were and that's why you had this thing called a Rhino that was like a really rudimentary thing. It was basically like a long metal bar welded onto the front of an MRAP or a Humvee with basically a big plate or like pieces of wood formed in such a way that it would disrupt an IR beam. So if the thing was targeted at a vehicle trying to hit the cab, it would instead cause the EFP to blow off this completely replaceable, piece of wood or metal or whatever you had welded on the front of it. Oh, and similarly, when I was in...
That's wild. I was going to say, because our Rhinos had... they were made for the IR beams, but they were also made for heat signatures. So the Rhinos that we had were a wooden box, but inside of it was a heat element that got really... It was a very small heating element. There was a cord that ran from the Rhino up to the cab, and they plugged it in somewhere, and it would be incredibly hot to the touch. It didn't catch anything on fire. I don't know how they they did that, but it like that. Just hearing is like, yeah, the Rhino, we had to plug them in, and you're saying that they just disrupted an IR beam, which they did. They were a large black box, but also for us, they put out a massive amount of heat, so that if something detected, because they would try to detect engine blocks, like engines that have been going. So that's
So as I understand it, the Rhino did get sold and installed by defense contractors. That became a thing, but in its earliest incarnation, it was literally just like handy soldiers with a welding torch that made it, and then they found ways to improve it. And similarly, when I was in Afghanistan, where the biggest threat was in our AO was pressure plate IEDs, effectively, we started using mine rollers, which are huge, but they're just big, like training wheels on the front of your MRAP that are gigantic and roll the ground, because the idea being that if you blow up a mine roller, like it sucks, you got to fucking scrap it, but it's better than blowing up the engine block of your MRAP or the personnel cab and, exploding a bunch of people. So everything was just adaptation. But then obviously, like, you'd have IEDs that were then offset. They, were smart. They could figure out what we were doing. And so they would build the pressure plate and have a long wire offset, more or less the distance of a mine roller to the vehicle cab, so that it would defeat that mechanism. So you sometimes would vary things up, and you'd throw a vehicle in, when that was happening, you'd throw a vehicle in the front that didn't have a mine roller, just in case. So there was all sorts of things you could. But it like I said, it was a guessing game. Every time I went over a culvert, I basically like braced for impact. Wow, we've been talking about this for a while. I know, good times. So this is all the backstory of, let's just say, is particularly with EFPs, why discussing Iran in any capacity becomes this hugely emotional moment for a lot of service members who are veterans of the war in Iraq. Now, over the weekend, Donald Trump was presented with a bunch of dumb comedy options of what he should do, basically with regard to rocket attack killed an American contractor on a base in Iraq. The U.S. responded by doing drone strikes in Iraq from Iraqi bases. This led to a huge wave of protests, which led to protesters storming the embassy and militias storming the embassy. They didn't get through to the embassy, but obviously they were completely surrounding it, blocking it off, setting stuff on fire. The Iraqi prime minister literally talked to the militia leaders and said, if you don't call this off and stand them down, I will resign right away, and like everything else that follows will be your fault. And they finally stood down. But then in response to this, the DoD, in discussion with the president, presented him with some courses of action, one of which was basically like a novelty nuke the moon option, which he picked, which was to assassinate the head of the Quds Force, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, Qassem Soleimani, who is a senior military figure in Iran, comparable to, like the defense minister of Iraq or the defense minister of Turkey, a very, very senior figure who's been involved in both the coalition to fight ISIS, but also in support of Bashar al-Assad's government in Syria. Guy who's been known for a long time in the region, obviously. And he was driving in his motorcade near Baghdad International Airport, and the U.S. fired a drone strike and killed him. This is basically the equivalent of Iran in a situation, let's just say in a situation where the Iranian military was operating in a place near American military, assassinating someone like Stanley McChrystal or David Petraeus or Jim Mattis. Imagine if Jim Mattis was doing a battlefield rotation and visiting, American like special forces operators in Syria, and Iran killed him in a drone strike. That's what happened.
I gotta say, no one knew who Qassem was before. I mean, like, okay, the State Department knew who he was.
Yeah, pundits didn't know who Qassem Soleimani was. That just goes without saying. But I mean, and everybody's spinning this narrative about how he personally killed American soldiers. It's like, he personally killed American soldiers in the same way that Jim Mattis and Stan McChrystal personally killed, Iraqi insurgents.
Right.
They were responsible for operations that did. But I mean, it's a really facile comparison. And just because, someone in your mentions who's like, Hillary killed my son when he, when the Department of Defense kicked my son out of the military for fucking abusing corpses, and he then later died of a drug overdose, that's Hillary's fault. Those kind of people are saying, that Qassem Soleimani killed American soldiers. It's like, a little more complicated than that, but
it always is.
Go off.
And this is my biggest problem whenever there's a large, anything military, right? Whether it be here in America involving American troops, or be it's overseas. And I'm sure that it's just because my brain is completely melted from being on Twitter too much, but it feels like everybody has to have a take one way or the other, and it's like either you have your Ben Shapiro's who have never talked about this man in their entire life, who spent the last 5 years talking about how like the worst thing that could happen in America is a transgender bathroom, and a gay couple being happy, and all of a sudden it's like Qassem Soleimani was the worst person. He was the enemy number one. It's good that we killed him. He was bad and everything. He's terrible. And then on the other side, you have various leftists who want to say, he was great. He fought ISIS. He was the lion of Iran, and he was a great man who loved babies and his wife. And like it's guys. There's no human being ever alive has ever been 100% one way or the other. I'm gonna go ahead and say, especially a fucking general.
Yeah, and let's just be honest here. That he was a combatant, but that doesn't mean that this was the right decision. And doesn't mean that it was a wise decision. It doesn't mean that it was morally right. It doesn't mean that it was politically or operationally wise. It's just
a fucking stupid move.
It was an incredibly stupid thing. And let's not forget that yesterday the Iraqi parliament convened a special session and they voted to expel all American military from Iraq. Which, to be honest with you, I mean, if you're putting on your strategy hat, why would Iran do something spectacular to get after American soldiers or American forces or American interests in the region when we've just handed them? I mean, I'm not looking at this like, I'm like, how do I strategize to defeat Iran? Because I think that the way that the U.S. treats the Iranian government as completely illegitimate and the Iranian state is completely illegitimate is driving so many of the problems, because they recognize there's 0 point in engaging politically and diplomatically with the U.S. when, everyone in the U.S. is somebody basically in the U.S. diplomatic and military establishment is like Tom Cotton. They're like, Iran made me gay or whatever, and they're furious and they can't stop being furious.
They just want to win a war so bad because, like, no matter what Bill Kristol or anybody else is going to tell you, Iraq and Afghanistan are not winning solutions. They're not things that we have won.
No.
And even if you could make an argument like, well, I mean, these missions and that mission, and overall, if you look at it, it's a win. It's not a satisfying win for people like these.
And also, like, they don't really want to consider the extent to which, I mean, just view this from the position of an Iranian military person or government person or just like informed citizen with regard to the current position of the U.S. in the region. The U.S. has bases in Iraq, it has bases in Kuwait, it has bases in Oman, it has bases in Bahrain, it has bases in Afghanistan, it has friendly, military facilities and operational, partner exchanges with the United Arab Emirates. Basically, it's got Iran, the U.S. has Iran surrounded. So, like, militarily speaking, it's not as though that they're going to be like, oh, America, we're just big bad meanies and we don't want to deal fairly with America. America's made it incredibly obvious that it's trying to completely surround Iran. And, I mean, that has to factor into the way that you evaluate the situation. If we're looking at this like the U.S. is completely neutral and a force for good in the region, and Iran is uniquely a force for bad, that doesn't really leave the, let's just say a pragmatic Iranian figure, leader, etc., very many options.
Right.
And so I guess the point I'm making here is that you don't have to lionize Qassem Soleimani to say it's completely fucking wrong that the U.S. treats Iran like this complete pariah and denies it all legitimacy. In doing so, you basically guarantee that you're going to have more head-to-head engagements and, roundabout ways of attacking your interests in the region because you refuse to see them as any kind of potential partner. And okay, you might despise the Iranian government and say, look at all these human rights violations. I'm sorry, man. You cannot fucking tell me that you despise Iran because of its human rights violations and are completely on board with countries like Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain.
But I mean, even if it's, not necessarily touching Iran, we have, drones, we have missiles, we have boots on the ground. We have
Navy fleets like constantly.
Right. Like if I was an Iranian, I would be like, and first off, we've already got sanctions on them. Like, we're already fucking with these people. And, recently, Iraq, as you said, has voted to expel us. And President Trump decided to have a Twitter meltdown about that and said that basically that Iraq would fall under the same sanctions of Iran if they end up doing that it's not legitimate, that they can kick us out. There's a lot of consequences that came with this that our president was probably not informed of, or maybe he was, but this is the biggest thing. This is why when you go back in time and you look at, because I read an article, I was like, why did, George W. Bush Jr. not, kill Qassem, and why did Obama not do it? Like Obama went the diplomatic route. He was like, hey, let's, if you guys do this, we'll do that. We'll all be cool, right? We don't have to worry about this. We're not going to be killing one another. We're going to, and like the smarter thing for Obama would have been to like fully pull out of Iraq, which we did 2011. We just kind of went back in 2014 to fight ISIS.
So to think about the level of consequence management here, like I said, they gave Trump the novelty nuke the moon option. He took it, decided to nuke the moon, and his response to announce it on Twitter was just to post no press release, no statement, just a big JPEG of the American flag.
No, not even big. It was 7K. Like, it was a heavily artifact. Here's the thing: if I needed a picture of the American flag to post on Twitter, and I Google image searched American flag, I would immediately have found a better American flag. This is the thing that kills me the most about it, and I don't know why I feel the need to talk about it, but I do. He posted a 7 kilobyte picture that was heavily artifact, and I don't know where it came from.
That's incredible. That's like super boomer meme.
It feels like he went to his own website and found like a thumbnail of a American flag and just downloaded that and posted it. It was incredible boomer energy.
But the thing about it is that I'm trying to say here is that they didn't advise Congress this was taking place. They let the Israeli government know they were doing it. So I imagine that they let Naftali Bennett and Benjamin Netanyahu know, but they didn't advise our government. They didn't clear this in any capacity. I mean, they don't have to, but I mean, like, it's one of these things where this is such a significant event. This is, a kind of acceleration or exacerbation of the situation that, I mean, it's a major milestone in terms of like confronting Iran in a bad way. And this just got treated as this blasé thing. And it's like Trump doesn't realize how bad he fucked it. And the thing about Iran is that, I mean, America being a big wet baby, when something bad happens in America, we shoot cruise missiles at aspirin factories in Sudan over it. Iran doesn't really have to do that. If they kick all the U.S. forces out of Iraq, that's a huge win for Iran. I mean, just like, I have to emphasize that I'm not saying this from the perspective of someone who's like, we got to fight Iran, we got to beat them because I want revenge. Iran turned me gay. I'm just saying that, like, if you're a pragmatic Iranian, kicking all U.S. forces out of Iran is good. Because that eliminates a significant amount of U.S. presence right on your border. And that also eliminates a significant amount of U.S. presence in a country where you have a significant amount of influence, because Iraq is, as I understand it, one of 2 other countries with a very significant Shia population besides Iran. So it's Iraq and, I believe, Bahrain. So the idea that, that this is, or like, they're going to turn around and this is going to cause World War III, like, no, I don't think it is. I think we have fucked it really badly, and they're going to kick all American troops out of Iraq. And personally, going out on a limb here, that doesn't really bother me. What bothers me is I think the Iran deal was working, and out of spite and fury, and out of the insane desires of a bunch of, war humpers, who most of whom dodged the draft when they were young because they didn't think it was appropriate for someone of their station to serve in the military. Which, I mean, if you dodge the draft because you fucking hate war, or you think America's foreign policy is bullshit, good on you. We support that on Hell of a Way to Die. But if you dodge the draft because you don't want to have to fight in the wars that you want to argue for, then go fuck yourself. And those people, by and large, are now, in senior positions in the American foreign policy and diplomatic establishment and military establishment to some extent, but not in the military capacity, but rather sort of like civilians who work, alongside the military. And so that stuff, this to me, this seems like a big win for Iran in the long run. Also, something to bear in mind is, I've said this before, there are a lot of fault lines in Iranian society. The sanctions are harming their economy. There are a lot of internal protests. There have been issues with the government. There have been, they've shut off the internet, for example, because of protesters. But the minute that you do something this just blindingly stupid, that creates this very obvious situation in which Iranians can see that the U.S. will not ever treat them as a legitimate state, as a state that has any pretension of deserving the same treatment as any other valid state internationally, then you wind up erasing those fault lines. You smooth them over because those people, most people are going to line up behind their government because they realize that they can't trust anyone else.
Yeah, if you want to think back to when, if you're old enough to remember 9/11 and the two airplanes hit the Twin Towers, you would never have found a united America right then and there. So we basically did, I'm not saying we did a 9/11 on Iran. I am saying that the following consequences of that of that kill is.
I think something that I would say is that in America it became extremely difficult to challenge the aggressive consensus on foreign policy, and you were immediately labeled a traitor, basically banished from public life if you spoke out or even just disagreed with whatever designs on international conquest they had based on what happened on 9/11. And so I think that's a good comparison that you just made, because think about all those people that you're like, oh, wow, maybe we can engineer some shady way with, our friends, the Mujahideen-e-Khalq, to overthrow the Iranian regime. All that regime change shit that people like John Bolton and his horny friends have been planning. Think about that from the American perspective. If you have people who are opposed to American foreign policy within America, you have dissidents, you have groups that are agitating for change. And I'm not creating a direct comparison between the U.S. government and the Iranian government here, just in case you're blowing your stack and you think this podcast is gonna make you lose your security clearance or some shit. But it becomes very challenging to oppose that in the face of such obvious aggression against your government. And think about that from the perspective of Iranians. If you had groups that wanted to align with U.S. interests and undermine Iranian government interests, you have just made their life a million times harder. And how many people are going to stick their necks out now to defend obvious American interests in the region, as dissidents in Iran, if they're, the average person on the street can see that the U.S. doesn't respect anything about Iranian sovereignty or its government's validity. Similarly, in Iraq, if you're an Iraqi and you think having the U.S. as a partner and having U.S. troops based in Iraq is a good idea for stability, foreign policy, whatever the fuck you want to call it, it's very hard for you to defend that now when the average Iraqi can look and be like, the U.S. doesn't care what our government says or does. They murder people on our streets with zero authorization from our government. They don't even tell our government. And if the reports are true coming from the Iraqi PM, it seems as though they may have used him to contact Qassem Soleimani to confirm the trace on his cell phone so they could authorize the drone strike. So the Iraqi president contacted what he thought was a partner for de-escalation of the crisis in Iraq, and instead they used that phone call to, get positive ID on Qassem Soleimani so they could kill him. Imagine how the Iraqi government feels.
Yeah, it's no good. It's no good, Nate. What we have done is, shout out to Trump. He may have just ended American involvement in the Middle East, at least in. He
certainly may have ended the U.S. the U.S. military presence in Iraq. Yeah, that's entirely possible.
Yeah,
and I mean, like I said,
it's one of those. This is one of those things where, like, if I was an Iraqi and was unsure of the future with or without the Americans, I would. This is the eventual, like. I can't imagine there's still Iraqi people who, just like the everyday people, who
just
would
think
support.
About it from an American perspective.
Yeah,
think about it
always.
From an American perspective. What would you do if we had a partner nation that had military presence in the United States for some ostensible threat or some, like a partner that was helping out with some crisis? Like if something, there was, just hypothetically speaking, there was some, massive border war going on between the U.S. and fucking Canada. I don't know. And then that foreign military force that was a guest in your country, in America, killed both an American citizen and, let's say, a Canadian citizen who was working in America, a senior Canadian figure, without any authorization from the American government. I mean, actually, that's not a far-fetched scenario. In 1978, the Chilean government detonated a car bomb in Washington, D.C. to kill a dissident political figure from the Allende government, and wound up killing him and his aide, who was an American citizen. And of course, the U.S. did nothing because the U.S. loved Pinochet. But I'm saying to the average American, if that was as high profile of an event now as it was, if that was as high profile of an event back then as this is now, and if the tensions were similar, you can imagine And if, well, I don't know, if Chile had previously invaded America, you can imagine how that would be received. And so I just don't think there's, I mean, this is going to sound weird, given the context, but I just feel like people need to empathize a little bit with Iraqis. If you're can think of what an Iraqi must feel that the U.S. thinks your country's sovereignty is a fucking joke, why on earth would you support or, risk your credibility, your livelihood, maybe even your life to defend the U.S. presence in your country when clearly they laugh in the face of your government asking for the bare minimum of courtesy afforded a government that's hosting a foreign military?
Yeah, it's just, as we always say, imagine it from your own perspective. Much like, imagine if somebody came in and just said, hey, Texas, we're just going to occupy you for a while. I mean, that's basically Afghanistan.
Yeah. Imagine if Jade Helm was real.
Right. So, I don't know. Like, it's, and I also want to emphasize, I don't think World War III is about to happen. I think Iran, in the coming weeks is going to get exactly what it wants, which is less American forces around it. Because if I was Iran personally, my thing would not be I need to go destroy the Great Satan, and the Iranian Ayatollah and the leader of Hezbollah both have come out and reiterated that's like when we say death to America, we don't mean like your normal everyday working American. We just mean your leadership, which has always been their thing. They've never wanted to wholesale just murder a bunch of American, like rando.
Yeah, I mean, Mark Bar Amrika is easier to say than, Mark Bar Hukumat Im Amrika. So, it's
right.
Just simplicity's sake for a chant, come on.
Yeah, it's easier when, like, symbolically, like, Arabic people do a lot of symbolism in their speeches. Very beautiful way of speaking. So when they say death to America, they don't mean your ass in Mobile, Alabama.
No, but when they say Ashrab min damuhu, they literally do actually mean I want to drink your blood. So just
but so do rich people inside of America. So that just keeps them young. So really, the Iranians just aren't going to pay you for the privilege of pulling your blood out so that they can drink it and stay young.
But I guess the thing that I would say, kind of to cap off this segment, is that I think that we have learned once again that Donald Trump is a huge moron, a huge self-defeating moron. But also, I think something that I'd point out is that if this plays out the way that I think it's going to play out, it's absolutely safe to say that the Iranians are better at statecraft and foreign policy and tactical patience than America. You might even go so far as to say that pound for pound, the Iranians are smarter than America, or smarter than America's government at present.
Well, the Iranians don't have the military capacity as we do, which means that because America, when you have a hammer, everything's a nail. The Iranians don't have that big hammer. So yeah, they have it's being smarter than us, because they have to be. I mean, look, there's not going to be a ground war in Iran with America. We are not going to go tank for tank. If we did, we would defeat the Iranian military in just like a war of attrition, jet for jet, tank for tank. They don't need to do that, though, because we will, as Americans, just consistently step on our own dicks around them, for them, to them. I mean, like, look, they had a good thing going, but they're like, okay, we kind of got what we want with the Iran, the nuclear deal. It's not great, but hey, we can enrich our stuff. They're the Atomic Energy Association's IAEA is inspecting us. Okay, everything's cool, whatever. And now this happens, and it's like, okay, well, maybe we can convince the Iraqis to get rid of the Americans, and they just did. And like, if we don't just leave, like that is basically, we are going to, like, if Donald Trump says we're not leaving Iraq, no matter what your vote is, fuck you and your sovereignty, fuck you and your decisions about what to do with your own country, we are literally going to unite the entire Arab world against us, like, very quickly. And that is not going to go well for people who are in Iraq and Afghanistan. That, things are not things already don't go well for a lot of those people. I mean, maybe if you're stationed in like the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar, any of these places that benefit from us because we sell them weapons. But man, the rest of the Middle East is not going to have it with us. I'm surprised that they have had it with us for this long, honestly. And I feel like a lot of it is just Afghanistan is still completely destabilized from our presence and from the Taliban and our refusal to do any kind of mediation or negotiations with any of the government, the governments there or the players that want to be a part of the government. But these consequences are basically we're delivering to Iran exactly what they want. And honestly, I don't really see this as, I don't know. I can't say whether it's good or bad, honestly. Like, I don't know what the next 50 years is going to hold, and I'm not going to try to sell you on one way or the other. I am going to say that I can see different avenues of approach that Iran can take with this. And when we have, like, people like to say that Trump is unpredictable, but he's entirely predictable. Like, you know exactly what he's going to do. He's going to do the dumbest thing loudly and then tell us we're all stupid for saying that he's stupid. Like, that is the biggest consistency we have with our president right now. So obviously he threatened to blow up Iranian cultural sites, 52 of them for the 52 hostages that were taken by Iran who were released. So let's not.
Yeah, and that was over 40 years ago. Like, it's just
right.
You can't overstate how so much of this just goes back to like pre-Reagan era war horniness
doesn't
that they've never gotten over.
Doesn't mention how we killed
290 Iranian civilians by shooting down a passenger airliner. Yeah, there's that.
Because they mistook it for a Tomcat. Jesus fucking Christ! It's not an F-14, guys. So
yeah.
So there's a lot of stupid animosity that America has. And God, I swear to God, as soon as Qassem was assassinated and somebody fucking dragged Ollie North's corpse as a talking head onto Fox News, I was like, this is just gonna get stupider and stupider.
I love the idea of that. Be like, oh yeah, I'm sure Ollie North will be like, wow, Qassem Soleimani was a bad person. How do I know this? Because I sold him weapons to fund a dirty war in Central America.
Soleimani was a commander during the Iran-Iraq War. He's been around. Like, it's not like he's some new player. And Iran-Iraq War was 79, 80, 81, something.
It was 80. It was 80. Started in 80, ended in 88 or 89, I think.
Okay.
Yeah.
And he was on the forefront. He was a big part of all of that as a military commander. So yeah, he probably knew. Ollie North probably like shook hands with that man and handed him a gold-plated AK-47 at some point in time. So fuck Ollie North. And obviously fuck anybody who's trying to sell you on the war. But yeah, honestly, I believe that it's not. This is probably not what the Iranians wanted. Certainly, nobody would want one of their top generals who, for better or worse, did fight against ISIS and help push the ISIS and ISIL forces back. But we are kind of just like, well, here's a new avenue of approach, and like you said, Iranians are a lot smarter than we are with diplomacy. I mean, like I said, the Ayatollah came out and was just like, hey, regular Americans, I don't want to kill you guys. I'm just mad at your president, just like you are, right? I mean, that's some I know it's not. I don't know how to say that. That it's smart. It's just smart. Really, it's smart to come out and say, look, you guys don't like your president. I don't like your president either. Wouldn't it be great if somebody killed him for $80 million or whatever the price is on his head right now?
They put a bounty on his head. Yeah. Well, I think the big thing I'd say to cap this off is Donald Trump's a moron. The planners are morons. You should never give him an option that you don't want him to take, because if you say, hey, Donald Trump will never pick fly to the moon and stick your dick in the rocks as an option, he will pick that option.
Absolutely.
And as we have seen, Donald Trump has fucked the moon on this one. So the moon, however, was a crescent shaped like the crescent symbol of Islam, and as such, it was an incredible affront to everybody in the region. So we have to make amends for that. However, before we make amends for that, or rather, before we wait on whatever happens next, let's talk about TikTok and the fact that the army is banning it, in its opinion, because they think that China might spy on soldiers. But deep down, we all know it's because soldiers are posting cringe.
Look, we all remember Vine, and Vine was here. It's a little 7-second video, so it was here for a little bit, then it went away, and Vine was great. It was a new way to do comedy. It's, hey, you have seven seconds. What can you do inside of this? And I remember there was an app before TikTok that was very similar, like where you could download like clips from movies or songs, and then you could like lip sync to them. And I can't remember what it was. And then TikTok kind of blew up. But I mean, yeah, look, Army privates and Marine privates, all these 18, 19-year-olds are gonna download these things. You're gonna like, oh look, I can get a lot of clout online by dressing up in my uniform with my fucking PV2 mosquito wings and doing some shit. But I want to say, Nate, soldiers have been posting cringe forever. The shit on Vine was where we got disrespecting a future U.S. Army soldier.
That is true.
And I guarantee you that boy probably now is a U.S. Army soldier, and probably being very disrespected. Hopefully nobody ever connects his name to that Vine, because he's never going to live it down. I'm
just going to say this, and this is just a deep cut for the real heads. I am not 100% convinced that boy from the TikTok, or correction, that boy from the Vine about you're disrespecting a future Army soldier is not my old first sergeant's son. He looks devastatingly like him. I will not name names. I will not name what unit that was in. But I'm just saying.
That is absolutely the son of a first sergeant right there.
I would not be surprised if he was the son of a former first sergeant of mine. And as such, that is hilarious. I think also that one of my favorite Vines was some guy being, doing the, guys say that they're going to, that they'll take care of you. And then it cuts, and then he's in uniform. He's like, but no, baby, I'll take care of you. But he's obviously like in his barracks room. He has slick sleeved. It looks like a uniform that he just got. Like, it hasn't been beat to shit at all. And he's an E2. And goddamn, like, what is giving? I don't remember having that much confidence, but also I'm an anxiety-ridden dipshit. But I also don't remember anybody that I was with in the military having that kind of confidence to post some cringe ass shit like that and think, yeah, this is going to get me laid. Yeah, I don't remember ever feeling like that was a wise decision. But then again, also, I mean, for me at least, I was always super reticent to even wear my uniform in public because it was always so weird. Also, I mean, being active duty, when you wore your uniform in public, you were just sort of another asshole on whatever army town you were stationed in. Whereas, I guess if you're trying to appeal to middle America, you're a youngish, probably decently in shape dude, so they feel like this is a thing that's going to give them some clout. Maybe slide in the DMs, get some nudes at best. At worst, maybe at best, actually, like get a military wife. But it's a very, very strange thing to see people kind of kids who were raised on weird military hero worship in the post 9/11 era then become troops themselves and immediately like declare themselves heroes on social media and get really weirdly like puff your chest out about it, when in truth we know that once you're actually in, you're just a huge piece of shit like everybody else.
And I want to I want to poke my head into every one of those videos and be like, yeah, that's nice, go pick up cigarette butts, dipshit.
Beat your face, you fucking cherry.
Okay.
Yeah.
I need somebody to sweep the motor pool. So when you're done with all of this, go fucking sweep the motor pool, dipshit.
Yeah, all right. You guys have 10 minutes to clean all the latrines.
Here's some brown paper towels and a spray bottle of Simple Green. Get to fucking work.
Here's some off-brand government issue Pine Sol and a mop that looks like it hasn't been cleaned since the Reagan era. Get to work. Oh, and here's the buffer. By the way, the buffer doesn't work. Deal with it, private. Imagine privates having to spin the buffer with their hands, just like very slowly grinding the floor. To be honest with you, man, I've made this point before on this show, and so, in true dad moment, perhaps I'm telling the same story, but I came to this realization when I was still in, that for us, we see each other in uniform, and our first reaction is to size up the uniform and size up the person in the uniform. Are they, what's their rank? What's their branch? Are they combat vets? Do they have any sweet skill badges? Chest candy, military uniform, flare if you're in the Army or Air Force, and Navy to some extent. Less so the Marine Corps, because the Marine Corps doesn't really do that. But I mean, every other branch does. I don't know if the Coast Guard does, maybe. But to a civilian, all they see is the uniform. So the uniform that a 4-star general, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, wears is the same uniform that a boot-ass private wears. I saw the other day a thing on Twitter about like the best military photos of 2019, and one of them was what looked like not an honor guard, but rather like soldiers assigned to a unit that were at a military funeral. Maybe they were just a detail that was brought out there to like salute a casket or something. And to the average person, this would be, wow, what a poignant moment. To me, I look at it and I see all these fucked up, misshapen berets and weird salutes from like this platoon-sized formation of soldiers, of whom maybe 2 of them have been deployed, and the rest of them are just privates. I'm just like, fix your fucking soldiers. What's wrong with you? Like, how do you take them out in public looking like that? And so I realized that to us, we size this up and we're like, go clean the latrines with your toothbrush, whereas people on TikTok and people in wider America just see them and think, wow, our brave heroes.
Right.
And it's such a strange disconnect. And
that's breaking these kids' brains, too, because they think,
yeah,
they did it. I went through basic training, and now I'm a hero. And, like, I went through basic training and got to AIT and was still relatively humbled because I was still surrounded by drill sergeants and getting yelled at. And then I went out into the real army and like, oh, I'm an shit. I'm nothing. I will be told to take out the trash. And, like, you kind of get that, like, ooh, some confidence inspired in me by the fact that I can do a whole bunch of push-ups, but also, like, you are constantly reminded that you're a piece of shit. And I feel like I whenever I see these videos of some private, it's like, I need to pull your NCO aside and be like, why are you not, like, defeating this boy? Why are you not making this kid, like, not post this cringe? Like, because, hey, man, I'm going to follow you on TikTok, and every time I see you post something, you're going to spend an hour with me, and I'm going to be smoking cigarettes, and you're going to be picking up cigarette butts. You're going to be low crawling from one side of the motor pool to the other side, because, God damn it, somebody needs to beat you down a little bit. I feel like NCOs aren't doing that to their privates anymore. Sexual pun not intended.
Of course. I would also say that once you see it, you can't unsee it. In a way, it's much like taking the red pill in the Matrix, which we reviewed this past week for our bonus episode to discuss whether or not it's fascist. And the short answer is no, but long answer is it's a fascinating movie. We've forgotten how good it was, how fun it was, and we've got a lot of thoughts on The Matrix and also the time capsule for the late 90s that it represents. So we're going to play about 10-ish minutes or so of that bonus episode. And if you want to hear the whole thing, not only can you get it on Patreon, but because it's a movie review, it's actually at the $3 a month tier. So you can get it and a bunch of other reviews just by signing up with the link that's in the show notes. You genuinely feel like Neo is a sympathetic character that you can identify with, who behaves the way that a person would behave in a situation like that. And he doesn't jump into it and immediately become the hero. It takes him a while to like come into his own and to sort of acknowledge the reality of what's happening around him.
Right.
And so
like when they
his
do the
character development, I think, is really good.
When they do the jump program and they're like, oh, he's going to, everybody falls the first time on the jump program, and because Neo gets told he's not the one, but we learn later is that the Oracle tells you exactly what you need to hear. So he was the one, but he needed to hear that he wasn't the one, so he would go and save Morpheus and then become the one. But while everybody's trying to figure it out, they're like, oh, look, he's so fast against Morpheus in the fighting simulator. Let's see how he does in the jump, and he fucks up the jump. And they're like, well, everybody, so I feel like the way that it was shot also lets you doubt. Like, obviously the movie centers around Neo, so like, sure, he's eventually going to become the one. But, at the age of 16, when I'm, not that bright and I'm just, watching like, oh, look at the cool special effects and, look at the pretty lady, you get that like, oh, is he the one? I don't know. Like, well, let's keep watching and find out. So I felt like that, the way that they did his development keeps you guessing as well, because you think like, well, I don't know, maybe Morpheus is the one, maybe Trinity is the one, I don't know, but then when Cypher does the betrayal, you get the like, okay, yeah, he's definitely the one. At least,
Yeah, but I also think too, like the fact that he has to figure it out, and he has to kind of like it's a question of the circumstances forcing him to sort of not give up. It's not as though he comes into the Matrix and all of a sudden he's just better than anybody else at it. Like it takes him a while to get that good.
right.
And so in that regard, I feel like his character development is really, really solid. And I think there are some tells, like the way Trinity acts, like you can sort of see like a potential love triangle, or a love, like a love interest. But I appreciate the fact that Trinity isn't just there to be a love interest to Neo. Trinity is absolutely like a fully fledged character on her own.
Yeah, she's a
and also
badass.
I think she's a huge badass. And I think the biggest thing too is, in a way, the Cypher thing is easier to figure out. But one of the things when she talks about what the Oracle told her, when you go back and watch it again, you realize, oh, okay, it's the thing about falling in love with the one. But it seems if you kind of see her like reticence around it, you would be led to believe, I think, that she thought she was the one, and it turned out she wasn't.
Right.
So in a way, like the fact that even in the sort of Matrix universe, it's the possibility exists that Trinity could have been the one, I think, in a way, or at least to me, shows you that she's treated as a serious character, just like Neo and Morpheus. And I think all three of those characters are really just well done.
Yeah.
I think Morpheus is such a, I don't know, just sort of enduring, redeeming character. It's a lot of fun to watch him and Neo interact. I'd forgotten how much fun the Kung Fu Dojo scene was. There's so much of this movie that's just, it's a blast. It's a thrill to watch. And yeah, it's a big budget Hollywood shoot 'em up, but it has something else about it. It has a certain, like, if not attention to detail, then just like a solidness of not just kind of like playing on tropes or whatever and letting it kind of happen. And so in that regard, when I think of to me, like I'm a huge fanboy, but when I think of films that are really technically complete in terms of how much attention to detail there are, I think of the number one example that comes to my mind immediately is Alfonso Cuarón's movie Children of Men. But this isn't Children of Men, but it's got a fully realized fictive universe and characters that are legitimately solid and that develop across the movie. And so to me, like, I think this is a much better film than even it's given credit for. It was a huge hit at the time, but I think as far as like a solid bit of storytelling, I'm very impressed with it now as someone who has a lot more reason to be jaded about storytelling.
Yeah, it benefits from being as I don't want to say complex as a story that we live inside of a computer program would be, but it's a very basic story. It's a hero's journey. You've got if you look at like Star Wars, it kind of like the original A New Hope Star Wars. It has kind of the same beats. You've got the person who is going to be the one. Luke Skywalker, Neo. They're young, they're inexperienced, they're a little bit dumb and naive, and then they eventually come into their own as it goes along. They get mentored, they get trained. In Star Wars, Obi-Wan Kenobi dies, but in the Matrix, Morpheus just gets kidnapped, so he has to go and save him. But it has that. It's a very simple plot that drives forward, that drives your characters forward. There's not a whole lot to it. And I think that like, not making something complicated, like when I think of a movie that is really, I don't know if I want to say perfect, but like a movie that is done in a way that I can't imagine any way to make it better, because they have just created a story in a universe that doesn't require any more explanation than what you're already given. I think of Mad Max Fury Road, where you're just kind of thrown into it, and it's just like, look, you've got this thing happening, that thing happening, and now we've got our plot driving us forward. We have the reasons for our plot driving us forward, and everything else is just, kind of peripheral and doesn't matter. You just need to know these are bad guys, these are good guys, and here's the eventual goal of our heroes. So the Matrix really does, and of course, like they really fucked that up with the two sequels. No idea why they felt the need to do that. I don't remember anything about Reloaded other than like the white dreadlock dudes and the Colonel Sanders as the architect.
Yeah, the professor who speaks in like fucking riddles. Yeah,
Yeah.
And then the weird the Zion sex orgy.
Yeah, the rave at Zion where everybody just dances and gets sweaty and then fucks. Like, Zion sounds terrible. I'd want to get plugged back into the Matrix too. So, but yeah, this movie, like standalone by itself, is really great just because it is a very simple story that isn't trying to do too much with itself. It just wants to it wants to be a hero's journey. And if it was a standalone, and in the end, it Neo shoots up into the sky, and if we never had anything else after that, I would have been perfectly fine. Like, I would never needed any sequels. I think the Animatrix was really good. I don't know if you saw those, the animated shorts that were done
didn't know.
by various anime. Yeah, it was really cool. It was just like little different things inside of the universe. Pre-war, post-war, things like that. I thought those were really good, but like the sequels did not need to happen. Now, it was funny too, because we were talking after the movie was over. My wife and I were talking about it. And Rage Against the Machine is playing as the credits go, and I said, it's weird that this movie does not have a Marilyn Manson song on the soundtrack. And like immediately after that, after I say that, the second song over the credits is a Marilyn Manson song. I think the soundtrack really speaks to that time as well. Like, I looked it up and I was like, man, this soundtrack is really badass, because I was 16 years old when this came out. But you've got like Prodigy, you've got Rage Against the Machine, you've got Filter. Crystal Method was not on there. I was kind of surprised about that, but you got Marilyn Manson. There was just so much of this that spoke to 16-year-old male me that I absolutely loved about it.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoyed this film, and in retrospect, I feel like it just seems like a document of such a different era, which is crazy, but stuff has changed so much, and I definitely prefer this film over Fight Club.
Yeah, I have no desire to watch Fight Club again. I'm sure it would be fine, but I would probably be really annoyed and embarrassed by it now, because I would watch it and be like, wow, this is something that I took to heart at one point in time. Like, you kind of get the whole, like, in the end where he's blowing up credit card companies to like free people of debt. But like everything before that was really weird and off-putting, and you're just like, this is dumb. This is a lot of just a bunch of dudes that really need to go to therapy that are just in a basement punching each other. Another fun thing about watching The Matrix was when I had to pause it and explain to my wife what red pilling is. So another way that The Matrix has fucked up a generation.
That's a really good point that we should talk about. Like, I was going to talk about, we do our normal thing about, is this movie fascist? But I mean, I think it categorically you can say no. This is a film that's I mean, it's very libertarian in a way, or it could be interpreted in a libertarian way. But it's not like freewheeling cowboy badasses. I mean, you think about like Cypher's complaint about how basically he's not free on the Nebuchadnezzar because he takes orders from Morpheus, and it's basically being in the military. But I would say the red pilling thing, when you think about how that's become like they use red pilling as a metaphor for becoming a right-wing extremist, or becoming, what you might describe as sort of espousing racist, xenophobic, gender essentialist views. Basically, red pilling as a metaphor for embracing chauvinism of all types has become such a thing. And this is legitimately where it comes from. Its origin story as a metaphor is The Matrix, the film from 20 years ago.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. As always, you can find me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts on Twitter. I have revamped the website, and we are going to be doing a lot more with it pretty soon. That's at hellofawaytodie.com. We also have our shop there. Please go take a look at it. There's going to be, it's 2020, so it's a time of change. There's going to be some announcements coming out some things that are going to change on the website, maybe a few things on the Patreon tier. I don't know yet. Just kicking some ideas around. But as always, we're here. We will always give you the one episode a week for free and a bonus episode per week. And we appreciate all of our Patreons. If you've ever been thinking or wondering, should I join up? Absolutely, because now you have like 3 years of back stuff to go through. Interviews and movie reviews and just me and Nate doing questions and answers and just hanging out and bullshitting. So something that soldiers are incredibly good at. So feel free to take a look at that. Patreon.com/hellofaWayToDie. Everything is there on the website. So until next week, Nate, we'll talk to you next week.
Zoom, zoom, zoom.